Should you give a fairy your name? Let's explore the issue on today's episode of this YouTube channel, whose name I won't mention. I'm your host, with a name I refuse to give.
If you would like to learn about fairy folklore, delve into modern fairy faith spirituality, and explore fun and fanciful fairy-themed events, please subscribe to Fairy Fortunes for new videos every Friday.
I saw some TikToks and some Reddit posts warning people against giving a fairy spirit your name. And to be honest, I found this really confusing because I had never heard of that before. So when I went looking for historical folklore, I really couldn't find anything to support that. So then I consulted my friend, the author Chris Allen. He has a brand new book releasing this December called Otherworld that focuses on the fairy realm. And he had not come across anything regarding this in his research either. And for those of you who are interested in Chris's book, I will have a link down below so you can pre-order his book. So after chatting with Chris, I did some additional research and I came across the Feywild. And the etiquette of the Feywild is that if you give a fairy spirit your name, they now have power over you. Bunny Bomb! And the rabbit in the room is that the Feywild is actually a world that was designed for the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. Now, Dungeons & Dragons became popular in the 1980s. I also think that this concept of not giving a fairy spirit your name may also be influenced by the inheritance cycle, the most famous book of which most people recognize as Aragorn, which was written by the author Christopher Paolini in the year 2001. And for those of you who are not familiar with that series, all of the characters in the inheritance cycle books have a true name that if another person discovers it, they can now use it to control that person. And so I really believe that this concept of not giving a fairy spirit your name is a completely modern invention. Now, I was able to locate some fairy tales from Germany that discuss names, the most famous of which being the tale of Rumpelstiltskin. So for those of you who are not familiar with that particular fairy tale, there is a miller who starts boasting about the skills of his daughter. He begins telling everyone that his daughter has the ability to spin straw into gold. And his boasting is so vehement that it makes its way to the king of the land. And so the king takes the girl, throws her in a dungeon, and says to her that she will spin the straw into gold or she will die. She is saved by a fairy who does not introduce himself, and he uses his supernatural powers to save her in exchange for something she values. But of course, the king is not satisfied, and when he sees all the gold, he locks her away again and tells her the same thing. Either you spin the straw into gold or you will die in the morning. And once again, the little man returns. But again, the king is not satisfied, and he locks her away for a third time. However, this time he tells the girl that not only will he allow her to live if she successfully spins the straw into gold, he will marry her and make her queen. But this time, when the little man returns to save her, she has run out of things of value to offer him, and so she agrees to give him her firstborn child. When the queen does give birth and the fairy returns to collect the child, she begs to be released from the agreement. So the fairy sets her to the task of discovering his name and gives her 3 days to do so. The queen fails dismally, of course, on the first 2 days. But her luck changes when one of her servants overhears a little man dancing around a fire.
Today I brew, tomorrow I bake, and then away the child I'll take. For little deems my royal dame that Rumpelstiltskin is my name.
When the queen provides Rumpelstiltskin with his correct name, Rumpelstiltskin becomes so angry that he stamps his foot in the ground and it becomes stuck. And in many versions of the story, when Rumpelstiltskin goes to pull his foot out of the earth, he ends up ripping himself into two. Original fairy tales were filled with a lot of blood and gore. But I just want to point out that in no version of the Rumpelstiltskin story, or the ones that are similar to it, does the queen order Rumpelstiltskin to kill himself. He himself loses control, and his own actions cause his demise. And if we look at the rest of the story, it is the loss of control that is the main theme, and not the power of names. So at the beginning of the story, the father is telling outlandish stories about his daughter, and the girl doesn't take any control over those rumors. And she actually resolves to die rather than just simply tell the truth. Rumpelstiltskin does not offer her control. He actually offers to perpetuate the lie. And then, rather than becoming queen on her own merits, she becomes queen through deceits. However, the queen is only able to save her child by utilizing control. The queen must own up to her lie and choose to face it rather than hide from it like she did in the beginning of the story. The story begins with a lie, and then it ends with the truth. And the moral of the Rumpelstiltskin story is really to show how lying can lead to losing control. Rumpelstiltskin is a personification of the lie, and the act of naming him is a metaphor for telling the truth. Names do have power, but their power lies in their truth. But most people have many different names. For example, I am Ruby Rose, but my brothers call me Sister. And then many of you know that I have a job that is outside of my fortune-telling business, Fairy Fortune, and the YouTube channel here. And there, my coworkers predominantly call me Amy. And then people who do not know me well in professional situations usually call me by my family surname. All of these names are a vehicle of truth, and they say something about me. Which one I use, though, depends on the context of the situation. And within the context of the situation, names also have an additional power of establishing boundaries. Now, I mentioned the name that my brothers use for me is Sister, and they are the only ones I allow to call me that, because it showcases the level of intimacy in our relationship. In contrast, I'm not going to go to a parent-teacher conference and introduce myself to my son's teacher as Sister, because that is a professional relationship, not an intimate one. So my family surname is the most appropriate choice to set that boundary. Now, the power of names in regards to boundaries is even especially prevalent in my case, because my family surname does not match my son's. And when people make the assumption that it is, and I correct them, I am establishing a very clear boundary, and in addition to that, I'm actually saying something about my values when I do that. I truly believe that the truth of your name has infinitely much more power than a lie. I think an interesting experiment to demonstrate this is that if you're at a bar or other social area and someone that is not attractive to you is trying to hit on you, instead of lying about your name, simply introduce yourself by your family surname with the appropriate title of Ms., Doctor, or Mr. in front of it, and see how quickly that will establish a clear boundary with them. Now, many people do want to take control of the power of names by assigning other people nicknames or shortened versions of their names. My birth certificate says Amy on it. I was never christened Amelia. Some Amelias are Amy's, and there is a distinct reason for that, even if it's just simply their preference. If a person, though, introduces themselves as Amelia, they are not an Amy, and you are trying to wheedle away their power from them if you call them anything other than Amelia. You are violating a boundary if you call them anything else, because Amy is not their name. The truth is Amelia. The reason that we exchange names is generally to establish some kind of connection. Now, that connection could be professional, like me and my son's teacher, or it could be intimate, like me and my brothers. If you're at a job interview, for example, you want the business to know your name so that they will hire only you. If you're at a social engagement, you want to be seen as friendly and you want to make those connections. Not providing your name, however, has its own set of consequences in addition to being rude, because it leaves your name in the hands of someone else. So for example, if you refuse to give your name at a job interview, they're probably going to stamp your resume with the word psycho on it and throw it in the trash. If you're at a party and you refuse to give your name, you are nonetheless going to receive one, because the people at the party will start referring to you as the weird one, the jerk, or the one to avoid. So if a fairy requests your name, they too are trying to establish some kind of relationship with you, a connection. So my advice would be to control the situation, and you establish the level of connection that you're comfortable with by giving them an appropriate name, and provide a name that establishes the boundary of that connection. Is it going to be professional? Is it going to be intimate? Is it going to be somewhere in between? You have the power to set that boundary by giving an appropriate name. And here's the thing, fairies are powerful supernatural beings. If you lie, they will know. And as demonstrated by Rumpelstiltskin, lies don't bring you power. They lead to your undoing. So let me know in the comments section below what kind of relationship you would like to establish with a fairy being. And with that, have a magical day.